Hey everybody, so yesterday afternoon news broke about a potential Duncan Keith trade from the Chicago Blackhawks, and that really set off a whirlwind of speculation and rumors yesterday. There's been a lot of talk about it around the NHL. Obviously, Duncan Keith is a big name, certainly getting towards the end of his career now, but he's still... that name just packs a lot of punch behind it. For former Norris Trophy winning defenseman, three-time Stanley Cup winner. Anytime somebody like that is on the rumor mill, it's going to generate a lot of buzz. And that's what we saw happen yesterday. So I want to talk a little bit about these rumors, Duncan Keith, where he might end up, if he's going to be traded at all, and just take a look at this situation. Before we begin, I just ask you to please hit that thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't. It helps out the channel so much and is greatly appreciated. But let's get into it here. The whole thing was set off by a Elliotte Friedman tweet yesterday afternoon, and obviously Friedman is one of the biggest insiders in the NHL, so when he says something, people listen and people make a big deal about it. And I'm going to read it word for word what he said yesterday. He said, "There are rumblings Chicago is working on a potential Duncan Keith trade to either the Pacific Northwest or Western Canada. Word is Keith and team are working together to get him to a place he wants to go. We will see where this goes." So, obviously, Keith very adamant about where he wants to go. He does have a full no movement clause in his contract, so he would have to okay any sort of move for him this offseason. And it appears that he wants to go to either the Pacific Northwest, which screams Seattle with the expansion draft coming up, or a team in Western Canada. His contract is going to play a big role in this. He's 37 years old. He's significantly declined over the last few seasons. He is not the top pair D-man that he once was. I think at this point he would be best suited as a number 5 on the bottom pair. Veteran depth guy who can still be a solid defenseman, but not going to be bringing you, huge numbers, playing 24 minutes a night, 25 minutes a night, and being a shutdown D-man like he once was in his prime. Duncan Keith is not that player anymore, and he hasn't been for the last few seasons. His contract is going to be a bit of an issue because he is making over $5.5 million for the next 2 seasons still on his deal. It's $5.538 million per season. So, Chicago, if they do get a deal done here, is definitely going to have to retain salary in some fashion. I don't think you're going to find anybody. There's virtually no way somebody is going to pay $5.5 million plus for Duncan Keith for the next 2 years, just straight up in a deal like that. That would not be a smart cap move for the team that would be acquiring him. So there's definitely going to have to be some sort of salary retained here, I would imagine. But like I said, he has a full no movement clause, so he is in 100% control of what happens, where he can go. He can okay a trade. He can decline any trade that he doesn't like. He's in complete control here. If we look at his numbers over the past 2 seasons, he's 37 years old now, and it's certainly shown. He took a big decline last year in 2019-2020, where he only had 27 points in 61 games. Was still a +1 on the season, but a big drop-off in point production for a guy that was usually almost always over 40 points and had some really good seasons with 50+. And then this past year, he played 54 games for the Blackhawks, only had 15 points and was a -13. Obviously, the Hawks aren't a great team, so that kind of, that hurts your individual performance as well when you're playing on a team that's not so good. The other thing is that Chicago's still playing him like a number 1 defenseman. And that is where I think that the Blackhawks have gone wrong over the past, couple of years. And now they don't really have anyone to replace him. They're still very much in a team that needs some work on the back end. They've had to play him as a number 1 defenseman because they don't really have any top guys there on defense, but Duncan Keith played almost 23.5 minutes per game last season, and that is way too much for him at this point. I still think Duncan Keith could be a really solid defenseman in a limited role playing 17 or 18 minutes a night. If you got him down to that kind of ice time where he was playing, 17 to 18 minutes, somewhere around there, I still think he can be a solid D-man and a good depth piece on a good team. He is not going to overhaul your entire defense and make you, drastically better, but he's going to be a good depth addition. And I still think for at least another year or two, he can play decent enough hockey to be in the NHL in a bottom pair role. So, though that starts to beg the question of where could he possibly end up? And there seems to be Duncan Keith rumors pretty often around over the past couple of years, and he's never been traded yet. So obviously there's no guarantee that anything is even going to happen and that this isn't anything more than just talk, but he's very limited in where he can go. Obviously they talked about Western Canada or the Pacific Northwest. So Pacific Northwest, the obvious thought there is Seattle. And Seattle would be a team that could potentially take his salary hit on the books and not really have a big issue with it because they're an expansion team. They're just getting started. They don't even have a roster yet. So Seattle could potentially take the $5.5+ million for Duncan Keith's cap hit. However, it would be a disaster for them to try and play him as a top pair defenseman still because he isn't at this point. So that would be interesting to see. But Seattle immediately comes to mind. And to be honest with you, I think Seattle is one of the most likely places for Duncan Keith to end up if he does get moved this offseason. Vancouver has come up in the conversation immediately. Obviously, they're a team that's always looking for help on the back end and could really, really use some added defense. However, I don't think Duncan Keith would be a great idea for the Vancouver Canucks. They need somebody much younger and much higher caliber who can really overhaul that defense. I think that one of the biggest issues for Vancouver defensively is that they have too many players kind of like Duncan Keith. They have too many depth D-men without having that high-end talent. I mean, obviously, Quinn Hughes can put up points, but we saw this past season, defensively, there's a lot of work left to be done with Quinn Hughes. They need a shutdown D-man who can be, one of those lockdown defensive top pair type defensemen. Duncan Keith is not that at this point at 37. So, why would you, when you already have names like Jordy Ben and Tyler Myers and Alex Edler, why would you bring in a Duncan Keith to even add to that? Because that's, you're not improving there. That's just kind of more of those, depth guys who are a little bit older and aren't really performing at the level that you need to. If Vancouver is going to do something to the defense, it needs to be a much bigger move than Duncan Keith. So, also the cap situation that Vancouver is in is not a good one. So, if I were the Canucks, I would not be in on Duncan Keith. Obviously, other Western Canadian teams like Calgary and Edmonton come to mind. If you take the salary out of it, I think Edmonton could be a decent fit as, again, kind of a depth guy. You don't want him playing 20-plus minutes a night. But if they could work out a deal where maybe some salary is retained and, they could get Duncan Keith in there to play a solid defensive veteran role on a bottom pair as a number 5 type guy, I think Edmonton might not be a terrible spot for him. Again, you don't want to overplay him at this point the way Chicago has been because you've seen the huge decline in his production and in his numbers, but I feel like Edmonton could potentially, possibly be an okay fit in a limited role. Calgary, I don't really think makes much sense for him. Calgary's a team that missed the playoffs this year. They're probably not going to be that much better next season. There's obviously a lot of chance here for Calgary to make some major moves in the offseason and try and overhaul things there. But again, they've already got some older guys on the back end, particularly, obviously Mark Giordano has been around a long time now. He's in his late 30s. They've got, who am I trying to Chris Tanev, who they brought in this past offseason. Now, Tanev's not old, but he's in his 30s now. And I don't know if bringing in a 37-year-old Duncan Keith would be that much of an improvement for the Calgary Flames. So I don't really see a huge fit there. Winnipeg, I guess you could maybe count as Western Canada. But again, I think Winnipeg is a team that would need more of like an overhaul of the defense, not just adding in one 37-year-old veteran guy. That's not really going to help the Winnipeg Jets too much. They're another team similar to Vancouver that I think if they're going to make a move, it's got to be a big move for a major top pair level defenseman who is going to make a significant impact on the lineup, and Duncan Keith is not that. So this is a really interesting situation. Not really sure if anything's actually going to happen. I almost feel like it's not. These rumblings are always around, it seems. But I honestly really don't think anything's going to happen. But I think Edmonton could potentially be a fit if they can get the salary figured out in a limited role. And I think Seattle is obviously the obvious choice here if they could somehow get a deal worked with the Kraken to get him to Seattle. Seattle's definitely not just going to take him. They're going to have to get some sort of sweetener for that deal. Because Keith is not worth that contract right now at this point in his career. So there would definitely have to be something added to that deal that favors Seattle. But I feel like he could end up there and kind of be a veteran guy to play on the back end and kind of help some of the younger players with Seattle when we find out what their roster looks like. So if he gets moved at all, I think Seattle would be the top place for him to end up potentially. But I'm not even convinced that he's going to get moved at all. I think it's going to be tough to get a deal done, but with all the variables into it, the no movement clause with him, getting to basically handpick where he wants to go, the decline in his game over the past few seasons and what his contract is right now is definitely going to be a hindrance on getting any sort of trade done. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Do you think he gets traded at all? If you do think he gets moved, where do you think he's going to end up? He's obviously made it known that he wants to go to Western Canada or the Pacific Northwest. We'll see what happens. That's pretty much what I got on the Duncan Keith situation. So like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon, merchandise store, donation links, and channel memberships are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.